I am Sophia Trinh, and I'm a Vietnamese American artist from Seattle, Washington. And I really enjoy bringing people together around the arts. I think you can't separate the artist from their beliefs. And I'm like, if people really knew who I was, perhaps they wouldn't like my art so much, but that's okay with me. Because I feel like a lot of my viewers come to my page not to be political, right? They want something beautiful. And I think my art is still like on the bridge of, it's so non-conflicting. And I think a lot of these issues can raise a lot of conflict. So I think I'm still trying to find that voice within the watercolor realm. I am terrified of being misinterpreted, but I'm learning that that is a part of being an artist too. Like I'll paint, a scenery, but it's not embedded with like political undertones or a movement. So I was like, that I think was a struggle for me. I was like, how do I create an art piece that speaks to solidarity, but also opens up these types of conversations where we can use art as the basis ground for these types of conversations. So the 3 paintings I created, I was trying to define like the process of building solidarity. And my thought process there is that to build solidarity, which in definition means to have some sort of solid ground amongst a community, it begins with being mindful, right, of the situation, of the conflict, of the history. And usually when you're in the initial learning stages, you can feel very tangled. And that's why it was, the first image is just me like dumping out, a tangled thought. And then over time, as you're educating yourself and as you're learning, you become more mindful of those connections and you become less tangled. And then throughout time and practice, you're building that community and solidarity. I think a lot of times when perhaps people look at my art, they're like, oh, it's very Pacific Northwest. And it could be kind of confusing when people actually meet me and they're like, oh, you're Asian, you're Vietnamese American. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm also, I grew up here. And I'm very much Pacific Northwest, raised and born. But I've noticed that what's so beautiful about art is no matter what the culture you come from, there's almost this connection in understanding painting or understanding dance or singing. It's very universal, I feel like. What I noticed is that this year it could seem like almost like a fad because a lot of people are like hashtagging Black Lives Matter or Asian Lives Matter, right? So it's just not understanding like the history or the context. It's hard to say Asians' lives, yes, of course they matter, but not to take away from the movement either. That's why I love James Baldwin's writing so much, because I think he brings a lot of light into, like, he's asking, Americans to put that mirror in front of their face and say, how does my existence perpetuate the conversation of race in this country or help it? And I want to live in a world where humans are respected for who they are and celebrated too for their cultural differences. It's hard. How can you turn away from another human being in need when you also have felt such pain or empathy in that regard? I think conflict isn't bad. I'm starting to understand that too. As I'm growing into my own skin, I think conflict and art is like a great place to begin those conversations.